Hey guys, RJ here, and I'm over at Miles' place this week because my girlfriend and I actually bought a home. We're renovating it, and I had to come over here to shoot, and that explains why this review is going to be a little bit late compared to normal. So, just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a heads up. And
Yes, in my house!
that's the third time he's interrupted me doing this, and I don't think I'm going to reshoot the intro. So, let's just go ahead and get started. So guys, as always, if you have not seen episode 4 of Big Little Lies on HBO, please turn this review off, go watch it, come back here, and then we can talk about it because there are spoilers ahead and I don't want to ruin anything for you. With that out of the way, let's just go dive into episode 4. This episode was absolutely amazing. They threw so many different things at us from so many different directions. There's a lot of things that we learn about the characters in this show and some secrets finally get out about some of the characters we love. And this includes Madeline McKenzie, who, while I wouldn't say is the main character of this episode, I say that we kind of learn more about her character than anyone else so far. And I say that because we've kind of been led to believe this entire time that she's been, this good mom, and which she is a good mom, but we're led to believe that she is this great character, that she has no faults, and besides being maybe a little bit hyper and a little bit over anxious at times, and maybe a little bit controlling of some people, which Ed even makes a joke about that in a previous episode where we are led to believe that she can do almost no wrong, and we end up finding out in this episode that in actuality she's been having this affair with the play manager pretty much, they had an affair and then it was over and then it kind of started again in this episode. So I think there's a lot of things here. One, Madeline is not a perfect human being, which obviously we should have known that from the beginning, right? Because nobody's perfect. And I really do like the way they kind of threw this in here because they lead us to believe that she's kind of like this guy is like getting onto her, and she kind of like willingly accepted it for a minute and then pushed him away. And I really like the way that they shoot that scene with Nicole Kidman and her where they're talking about what was actually happening, and she says like, oh yeah, he touched me, and or maybe it was I that touched him, and maybe my hand was up his shirt. And yeah, I just love the back and forth that they're doing during this entire scene with Nicole Kidman. And then of course Perry comes on to ruin it in the creepiest way possible, basically grabbing Nicole Kidman from behind, grabbing Celeste, and he creeps me out beyond all belief, and I'm surprised Madeline kind of hasn't caught on to this, right? Like, her and Celeste are supposed to be really close, and we get to see them kind of work together in this episode to end up defending the play. They end up winning that court case with Celeste because she is a freaking beast, right? She goes through this court case like nobody's business. She doesn't stop at all. She even has to shush Madeline a few times, which I thought was hilarious. But I think people, if you're a lawyer, you have to be able to keep your cool in pretty much any situation, at least the good ones. And it's pretty obvious that Celeste is really good at her job. And we get this emotion from her when her and Madeline finally get back to the car after the victory. And, it's not 100% of victories we learn later in this episode. But the way that Nicole Kidman acts in the car is absolutely stupendous. The emotions on her face as she finally is able to openly state that being a mom is not enough for her. And it has to be hard talking to Madeline because Madeline is almost a full-time mom. Yeah, she does some part-time stuff, but first and foremost, Madeline openly says that she is a mom, and she kind of makes fun of career moms. And I don't think that's anything against Celeste herself, and I don't think Madeline actually has anything against career moms in general. But I do find it interesting, like the little give and take that they have in that car where Celeste starts crying, and we, the viewer, obviously know why she's really crying and why she really isn't going back to work. But Madeline seems very confused, and she's like trying to push her, like, if you want to go back to work, then you should go back to work. And obviously, Madeline pushing her to do one thing, Perry pushing her to do another thing. It ends up kind of boiling to a head this episode, and I want to say that my theory is almost confirmed. You can watch my theory video on Jane Chapman, but I think it's all but confirmed at this point that Perry is the one that raped Jane Chapman. It's so painfully obvious at times just because of the way he acts, and I mean, in this episode alone, he is really, really touching my last nerve when it comes to hurting Celeste. And the way he does it is so freaking creepy. Like, he starts off with like a normal conversation, and then eventually it just like kind of blooms into this huge controlling thing that he has to have everything in her life, that she can't do anything without him. And I mean, this is like classic signs of a psychologist saying, this guy's freaking crazy. He needs help. And yeah, so we end up seeing this scene near the end of the episode where he ends up grabbing Celeste by the neck from behind, and she's obviously in distress. And then all of a sudden they hear one of their kids coming back, and he shouts like, "Hey, Mom, Dad, are we ready to go to school or whatever?" And he breaks off. And this is not the first time one of their kids has probably walked in on this happening. And that leads me to my other theory, which I did in, I believe, my episode 2 review, in which I talked about Ziggy Chapman is not the one that hurt Annabelle. And I think it's pretty obvious at this point that it was probably one of Perry's kids that did it. And my evidence to back this up is actually the fact that we learn during Ziggy's kind of psych evaluation that he gets. And by the way, that scene was extremely emotional for me. I actually went to a child psychiatrist, not for anything like this, but just in general. And just seeing kind of the emotions on Jane's face, seeing her son in there, and just the fact that he's being questioned about the fact that he might have hurt Annabelle or another child. And and we end up learning from the child psychiatrist that in fact Ziggy is very sweet, well-tempered, and he seems like a very nice boy, which is what a lot of us viewers kind of thought the whole time. And he does seem like a very sweet kid. So we end up kind of learning that in fact, not only is Ziggy a sweet kid, but he might actually be being bullied himself. And I think that is the key, right? So we have 2 kids so far that we know for almost a fact are being bullied. What does that line up with? How about Celeste and Perry's 2 kids, right? I'm pretty sure that both of them are tag teaming Ziggy and Annabelle. And the reason Annabelle actually keeps looking at Ziggy is because they are both victims of the same crime. Why she ended up blaming him in the first episode, I'm not really sure on that part. Maybe it's just like they're both victims and they didn't know who else to blame. And maybe she really did think it was him at the time, or maybe she likes one of those boys. There's a lot of questions there to answer, but I think that's a pretty obvious theory right there, that Ziggy and Annabelle are being bullied by the twins, and in fact they're getting this violent acts out from seeing their mother and father interact, right? And I think this is pretty obvious because not only do we see one of those kids walk in on Celeste and Perry in this episode, but just the way that they've acted, the fact that the hippo ended up getting hurt and missing a leg, and there's been a lot of little signals with them, them firing guns and stuff, like water guns and stuff at each other, and not listening to their mom at times. They seem like sweet kids, but at the same time, something seems just a little bit off with them. So that's my theory for that. I'm pretty sure Ziggy is innocent, which thank God, because he is such a cute kid in this series, and I really would have hated to see him actually be the villain. And clearly there is a lot of time left. Maybe he really is, and he just tricked that child psychologist like nobody's business, which props to him if he did. But I think it's pretty obvious that Ziggy is a great kid, and we should not suspect him from here on out. Some of the funniest parts of this episode that we get are actually the Ed, Nathan, Bonnie, and Madeline stuff, right? Nathan, basically, they've had control of Abigail for a week, and I definitely think there is something going on there. Maybe not between Nathan and Abigail, but maybe somebody else, and I have a theory video that'll be coming out soon about it. But I really do think that there's something weird going on there. Her excuse that her mom is too controlling and, wants to do everything for her and is putting too much pressure on her seems like a load of bullshit to me, because Madeline's been like that her entire life, and it took her until like 17 to realize that her mom is super controlling. That just screams baloney to me. And the way that she acts around other people, just something is off with her at this point. I'm not sure exactly what's going on. Maybe she's being abused. There are definitely some weird tones going on with her as a character, and I do like the fact that she sneaks out of Nathan Bonnie's house with a bottle of liquor, and Nathan yells at her. But yeah, all that aside, the dinner between Nathan, Madeline, Bonnie, and Ed is going to be hilarious. I really hope they end up showing this. It would be probably one of the funniest moments of this show so far. I mean, even the what I would call the pre-match for this, where Madeline and Nathan meet with each other, and they're kind of like sharing stories about who's crazy and who's not, and Nathan tries to fire off some stuff that Madeline made him do, like spraying like DEET, staying away from DEET and stuff like that. And I just thought in general that was really, really funny for me. But I do have some questions with the Ed and Bonnie scene. Ed is acting really weird when he gets in there. He's like, yeah, sweat on a woman's body is really interesting. And there's something a little bit off with Ed, maybe. Maybe Nathan's not too far off base here. I don't think that he's actually a psychopath, but maybe he ends up surprising us all, and instead of being steady Eddie, he's actually crazy Eddie. And there is a really good back and forth between Bonnie and Ed. They're trying to say, hey, I just want to keep the peace at this meeting, at this dinner that we're going to have. And I just find it really interesting the way that each of these sets of parents are trying to control Abigail in a different way. And I really would like to see kind of where they go with this. Did she actually move out because of Madeline? Is there another reason? Or is like Bonnie just trying to control her from this other side? And there's a lot of things to answer there between Madeline, Abigail, and Eddie. There's definitely something going on. Let's talk about our final main character here, Jane Chapman. We learn a lot about her this episode. We end up getting this picture of this Saxton Banks or whatever that, gave her this fake name. And Madeline ends up looking him up. And Jane stares down at the picture and is like, yeah, that, she, reaches back in her memory and she ends up seeing, that guy's face on the person's body. And I think this is kind of a false flag. And it's actually talked about a lot with rape victims where they see someone that kind of looks like the perpetrator that hurt them, and they end up putting a different face onto the one that was from the past. And I mean, obviously this happened a long time ago, right? Like, our memories are not perfect. So you put a face in front of us that looks very similar to someone that did something terrible to us, and we can easily replace the original image with the one we're being shown. And, this is just to kind of throw her off of the Perry trail, I think. I don't think Madeline is doing it on purpose, but I think this is kind of just throwing her off of the trail. But we get a lot of stuff about her this episode. Nothing like in depth, but we get a lot of character kind of emotion coming out of her where she's, breaking down, where she doesn't know if Ziggy's actually a bad kid, if she's going to be like the person that did this to her in the first place. She always has to have that thought kind of in the back of her mind that maybe her kid is exactly like the person that raped her, and maybe inherited some of her his violence. And there's definitely some weird things there. I do have to kind of question why she moved to Monterey. If she knows like her rape victim might be close or near her, why not leave the state entirely? I know that's a lot to ask out of someone because family, friends, that type of thing, but she already moved to a new town. Why not just move to a different state? I do find that a little bit strange. But on top of that, let's talk about that final scene, right? We get this kind of lapse of her a few different times where she's running towards that cliff, right, at like pretty much breakneck speed. And the first few times we get her stopping herself, and then the last time we get this extremely powerful image from her jumping off the cliff, ready to dive into the abyss. And obviously that's not a real thing, it's just her imagination. But just the way she looks as she's, listening to her ear pods, and she's like bending over the sink, she's breathing really heavy, trying to sing to herself, and she's imagining all this, herself jumping off that cliff, giving up. And obviously I think it is Ziggy that is holding her on this planet. I'm guessing if she didn't have Ziggy, she might have already killed herself, or I don't know. But the point is she is clearly still like thinking about doing this, and obviously she's resisted at this point or else we wouldn't have a character. But the thought is on her mind, and that does worry me for her longevity throughout the series. Well, guys, that's pretty much it for me. Like this video if you liked it, dislike it if you absolutely hated it and you never want me to do a review again. Subscribe to us here on YouTube, that really helps us out a lot. Comment down below, I want to know your theories. And I'll say this once more, book readers, if you are going to ruin things, I'm going to block you automatically. Please do not ruin the show that we have only reached like halfway for so far. I know that we could read the book and learn all of the answers. That's not the point, and that's not why I'm doing this review. So please keep spoilers out. If you want to add some in-depth information to the things we've already learned on this show, terrific. I love that stuff. So comment down below with your theories of who's going to live, who's going to die, and do you think I'm a little bit off base with the Ziggy or the Wright kid, the Wright twins? Let me know down below. I'm really interested. Follow us on social media, and until next time, guys, we'll see you soon.